Hey folks, Green Stuff Gav here. Before we start this week's video, I just need to make a quick phone call.
Hello and welcome to another vlog.
Mort, we're being held somehow.
On screen,
Hey Mort, Green Stuff Gav here.
Green Stuff Gav, my old nemesis.
What?
Well, you did beat me at Blood Bowl when we played that one time.
I suppose.
Who is this person? What do we want?
I hear you've got quite a collection of the Realm of Chaos books.
Oh, these books here I'm conspicuously framed next to.
What I don't understand is, for all of your old school goodness, how is it you've not used the best part of these books?
The random picture of the woman in lingerie?
Random mutation tables. I loved Road Trader page 53. Fantastic. I'd like to see you do something with those random mutation tables.
Okay, but I want to see you do one too.
Well, yeah, that's fair enough. I'll roll something up as well and let's see what we can do.
And just to make it more interesting, what we'll do is we'll swap miniatures and we'll paint what each other has built.
Yeah, sounds good. Remember, have fun.
Oh great, it's going to be one of those contrived crossovers.
Okay, so with Mort preferring the Realm of Chaos books, I've actually got a copy of the Slaves to Darkness on PDF. So what we'll do is we'll roll up a character that we will be modelling, and hopefully Mort will do the same. Now the Slaves to Darkness book, being a massive tome, has actual chart for rolling up your retinue, where you can roll different followers for your chosen champion of chaos, and I thought that would be a really good starting point to get something unusual rather than your generic chaos champion. Now the retinue table rolls on a D100 chart, so we're going to roll 2d10, one of which is a percentile, and see what race we get. So we are rolling 31, I don't know if you guys can see that one, which gives us a Chaos Dwarf, which I've done normal dwarves but never done Chaos Dwarves, so that would be quite a challenge. Now the personal tributes table, which we're going to be rolling 6 times on, is a D1000. Now for those of you who haven't done anything that scale before, a D1000 is effectively 3d10, and then you pick one for your hundreds, one for your tens, and one for your digits. So in this instance we got 375, but obviously we will roll and see what we get. So 6 attributes. We're going to start with another 397, which is fast, which will affect the pose I think, but not really a lot on the modelling, or certainly not the painting, unless you want to paint Go Faster stripes. See if we get something other than a 3 this time. There we go, we got 905, so 905. Which, according to him, is tentacles. Ooh, nice and chaosy. Writing these down as we go. Our third roll is 416, which on the chart is Flaming Skull Face. It's a very Ghost Rider. Fourth roll is another 361, which is extra joints. So for that would probably be extra jointed legs, and that will help show that he's extra fast. Our fifth roll, 861, is a tail, which shouldn't really be too difficult to add, especially with tentacles everywhere. To make it look different, tentacles will be interesting. And then our final roll, ooh, 0053. So 53 gives us a bestial face. I'm going to re-roll that one because he's already got a skull face. 7, 4, 2 is pseudo demonhood, which again the nature of the miniature will basically cover that. So let's have a rummage through the bits. We'll get the bits box out and have a look, see what we can do. Okay, so having had a rummage through the bits box, here's a few bits and pieces that I think should work quite well. Now we've got a skull for the flaming skull head. We've got 2 bits of torso. Unfortunately, I don't have any actual dwarf or real chaos bits, so you might see this plate is the back of a chaos warrior, 2nd edition chaos warrior, and the front of some random high elf, but I think the detail on this should work well for a chaos. We've got a Saurus, possibly one of the characters that was floating around the bits box. This tail and crotch should work well, and then 2 demon legs. Now they are unfortunately both left legs, so we'll have to do that. The important bits, we got the extra joints in there, so we'll be trimming these down, making them more dwarven in scale. Now, due to all the Mort stuff being on rounds, I've done a round base with a nice little brick texture from some plastic art. I don't know if you guys can see that, probably not. But let's have a look and do some converting, which is my favourite part. Now, the key for when doing any in-depth conversions is about working your timings out. Stuff's boring. So first of all, I'm going to glue some bits that isn't even going to fit, so let's trim this arm, and then yeah, we can glue this torso together, give it a chance to set while we work on the rest. Now this isn't going to be pretty, but we are going to be doing a lot of green stuff to this one, so that will give us a bit of leeway with the conversion itself. Trick is just to get it so that it lines up nicely, so that isn't straight. Don't know if you can hear that, but the police are out in force today. Let's just have a touch of glue. Now this doesn't sit quite very well on, but we will be bulking it out with green stuff, because we've got to sculpt things like the tentacle arms that we rolled for. So that can go on there. See the top lines up well, but the back doesn't. But again, I think I'm going to duplicate this, maybe take some of this detail off, duplicate the fur this side, and then fill the gaps, and that gives a nice gap to put our flaming skull on. So while that dries, for the legs I'm going to cut them off here, because that gives a nice long tail, and then put the legs on, which will also fit well with our demonic properties. So because I'm going to be cleaning this up, I'm just literally going to snip this with a pair of clippers so the torso can go back in the bits box, and because it's a nice tail. I need to trim this nub up, which I presume might be a rider of some description, but regardless. And then debating taking these bits down a bit. So if we look at where this fits, and where he'll stand on the base. So that'll fit well there. And while we will be sculpting the details and blending them together, I'm going to just trim the contact points, get us a bit more of a solid contact. If you can see that, but that fits on there, nice. But I'm going to take this section down, I'm going to cut it here and here. I'm also going to cut the leg here and here, because that will give us a bit more dwarven proportions. So, see my marking. This will give us a, while he will have long legs, he will still be shorter than your average demon. So give him the dwarf, chaos dwarf look. Let's take some of the flash off before we glue. Just a touch. A lot of the Games Workshop plastics these days are a lot better for flash and mould lines than they certainly were back in the day. I don't know. Yeah, so that still lines up quite well. So let's put a tiny bit of glue. This way polystyrene cement would probably be easier and it gives a stronger join. However, I'm going to be, speed is the essence here, and I'm going to be green stuffing over, so that will give us some extra strength to the joints anyway. So get them nice and lined up. And I'm going to leave that to dry before I glue the rest of it. Do the same this side. Now this leg, again, it's another same side leg, a left leg, but I'm going to be gluing it on the right and then doing some sculpting work on the other side so to hide it a bit better. But this will also go into the fast description, so we can have someone sprinting at full pelt. So that's where this is going to go. So what I'm going to do first is trim all this plastic back to sort of duplicate this detail, almost to mirror image the other side. So just being careful, because it's very easy just to get plain flat cuts, whereas we're actually looking at effectively taking the edges off and smoothing as we go. We can run a file over if we aren't quite happy, but I think this will work fine. Let's take some of the detail back. I am going to get a file into this bit just to clean up some of this musculature. So a nice round file to give us a bit of a curve. Just going to take this out a bit. Following the line of detail will give us a nice effect and help hide the fact that it is actually two left legs on it on this model. So let's just go in here, tidy up the detail bit. Because although we won't be painting this one, Mort will be painting it. We want to make it a bit interesting to paint and not just flat detail. So we're going to bring the leg in a touch just to give it a bit more organic texture. Because although we've got the demon descriptive, still, if you look at all the demons, they've got intricate detail everywhere. just working away the plastic just to give us a bit more of an organic feel to it. Obviously, if you were doing something armoured, you could just do straight cuts, and while the top of this model will be heavily armoured, I like the concept of tiny little dwarf wanting to be faster, so whichever Chaos Patron, give him demon legs. And by cut, we'll cut this one down as well to make sure he's got a smaller stature. So. That should work well. And again, just test a bit and see how it looks. That looks quite good. Obviously we're going to be cutting this section down as well, but by doing the detail beforehand gives us a better idea of when we clean up any details. Now, if you were to be really sort of picky about it, you would put them side by side to make sure they're the same length. However, because they're on different sides, and quite frankly this is a follower of Chaos, it doesn't really make a lot of difference. So we're just going to take out a chunk of the leg, and then a chunk of this leg. Again, we want a smaller stature, but we do want to retain the extra joints. A bit of a tidy up, make sure we've got no obvious flash, such as down here. We can glue this foot back on. Again, this super glue is very liquid, very fluid. So we're just going to glue this, drop it, but we can see the details line up there, although there will be a bit of filing to do once it dries. Talking of drying, the good thing with super glue over plastic glue as well is it doesn't need as long to set. So at least we can glue things and get them together. And although it is still not as strong as it will be, at least it's strong enough to manipulate. And then once it's all glued, we can give it the sculpting that it needs. And again, we're just lining up as much as we can, because we will be going over and filing it down to get rid of some of that joint. That's going to go on there, so that fits well. Let's glue this leg back together. Again, without putting too much glue on there, but enough that gives us some room to manipulate it. And again, we'll go in and we'll tidy all this up before we glue the leg back on. That one's going to sit on there. It's going to be nice. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Now it's had time to dry. So we're going to effectively cut all this to build that out. I am going to take these gems off, I think, and we're going to green stuff over this bit. But first, I should have done this first. Let's take this arm off. And give it a bit of a tidy up. So looking here, we can go for a nice shoulder pad. His tentacles will come out here. Put a nice icon of chaos on there, I think. So let's just slice this carefully. What we'll be doing is we'll be sculpting a little chaos icon or room, a nice flat circle to sculpt. Maybe a little star of chaos on there, who knows. Just going to take some of this elven detail off. It's easier to do now than when we've got everything glued together. So just going to smooth that out. I'm going to leave these gems on there because that'd be a nice bit of painting. Whether they're stolen or they're chaos gems or whatever. I'm not massively knowledgeable about chaos dwarves, but I imagine if they're anything like dwarves, they like their shiny things. So I'm going to put some extra green stuff over this little elven detail, build this bit out to here, and build up the shoulders. Now it probably won't make a difference, but I'm going to tidy up this little icon, because although we're going to be putting something chaosy over the top of it, just in case it doesn't quite cover. It always never hurts to have a blank surface. That works well. Again, normally I'd clear all this out, but we're going to be sculpting tentacles on, so that's fine. And this, I just want to come in a bit more, smooth this out. There. Now I have got a tiny, very sharp scalpel, just because this isn't quite as close as I'd like. The smallest little detail will show up when you come to paint. And as we said, Mort's going to be painting this, so we want to make it nice for him. It's often tiny little details like tidying this up that really helps a conversion stand out, from make it look less like a conversion and more like that's how the model was originally designed. So just tidy up, taking out a tiny little sliver by sliver. Again, I doubt anyone will notice, especially when it's undercoated. However, it makes me happy to know it's done. So lining these bits up, you can see this front part needs to come off just to make it fit a little bit better. Again, we're going to be bulking all the armor plate up to make it look a bit more natural. However, it's easier to build stuff back up than it is to cut it back. So we're going to take quite a huge amount off. Although we then snip the load, we're going to use our knife because this is effectively going to smoothen the cuts out. So very similar to what we've just done, but at a bigger scale. Just give it some clean organic lines. So although chaos is good for not symmetry, having some actual symmetry does help. So that fits on there a bit better. You can see there's a nasty gap there, but again we're going to add some details to hide that. So plenty of glue. Thankfully where we're going to be sculpting, It's going to add to the strength. So keeping this center spine center in line with the back gives us a really cool pose. Effectively, he's going to be running full pelt. Cool. Now I would like to glue the legs on, however that will make all this green stuff work more difficult, so just looking to see how he fits. That's going to go well on there, I think. And then after we fill the torso in, the skull will need to be sat on a bed of flames because we got flaming skulls. So his other leg is going to be sprinting because again we rolled fast, so he will only be 1 foot on the base. But I'm going to let that glue dry. We're going to come back in a bit and do some green stuff in work. So now that that's dried, these pieces are glued on, we can start doing a bit more sculpting work. We're going to fill in these gaps where we've stuck the running leg on. Then we're going to do some flame effects on this skull. So just like with the last one, we're starting with a bit of green stuff and just working it in to blend the details together. Nothing too strenuous or new, just like the last one. We're just continuing the detail, make it look like that's how the model was originally sculpted. Let's take some of this bit of a tidy up. Again, see, so where we've got this muscle, we're just going to add a bit of definition. Scrape away the excess. And that will blend that in nicely so that when it comes to be painted, it gives us a nice texture. Just going to tidy this bit up. Right, let's do some flame effects. Now there's a couple of different ways to do flame effects. You can start by doing a whole flat section, letting it dry and then sculpting the flame texture on, or my personal favourite way is to sculpt the vast majority of the flame itself and then go in and add bits later. So the way we do this is simply with nice sausage of green stuff, plonked in place. Now by rolling it out on the board, we've taken off any fingerprints or things like that that we've just put on the leg, because again we don't want anything to be standing out. Thankfully we've got this nice tail to hold on to, but otherwise that's where things like your painting handles or gluing it to a cork is very popular. All we're doing is just blending this and giving it some definition. So funny enough is we're ending up with a single point with multiple parts coming off to it, which will give it more of a realistic flame texture. At the moment it just looks like it's got a very malformed unicorn. But what we'll be doing 2 more, and then we'll be, after it's dried, we'll add some more individual small flame effects. So but again, where this guy's sprinting, we're angling the flame backwards, so almost like he's generating the flame and not that it's just sat there stood upright. Again, we want to make it as natural as possible, or as natural as a Chaos Dwarf with his head on fire can look. So again, This also has the benefit of blending the flames together, gives it stability. So just going to modify them to give a bit more interest. And I'm going to just carefully give a definite suggestion of a flame there. Don't want too many flat spaces, because otherwise it just looks boring. But if you put too many lines and too much detail on, it will look more like he's just got wild hair. So it's a very fine line, but the thing with any sculpting is you're just manipulating the putty until it looks right. That's all we're doing. So that's a bit too much, so I'm going to take this back, make it a bit smaller. Obviously the less putty you use, the smaller the detail you're doing. So that should be just about right. We're going to again roll it out on the mat so that it removes the fingerprints. Some people complain about how green stuff is sticky, and it's true, it's a very unusual medium. It's certainly not like clay or anything like that, but it does have its benefits. It became the traditional medium used for sculpting for a reason. So you can see we've got a bit of a gap here, but I plan on adding 2 small flames coming out of here, so let's just tidy this up to make it a little bit more like flame and less just stuck on. Again, we're manipulating it to give it a bit of texture. Cool. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm happy with that. So because we've got a girt load of green stuff left over, I think we're going to do a couple of tentacles first and then do the fur effect later. So funny enough, very similar to the flame technique, we're going to start with a bigger load of green stuff, sausage of green stuff. And we're just going to tuck that in to give it an anchor point. Again, by making our finger wet, we can just manipulate the shape. Now the reason we're doing this last is because if we give the green stuff longer, it will go a bit more rigid. Give it some rigidity so that we don't have to worry too much about manipulating it as it sets. Now I'm thinking I'm going to do 1 on one side and 2 on the other. Obviously with this being chaos, asymmetry is always a good thing for pointing out how chaotic it is. So making sure they're all different sizes as well. And so we're going to repeat the same. Sausage of green stuff, just tuck it in there. Same with this one. Again, these are all different sizes, so that will help emphasize how chaotic this is. But we just want to make sure we get this in the right spot. There we are. That's looking quite cool. What we're going to do is we're going to let them set, and then we're going to add some little suckers all along them to make them look a bit more like octopus tentacles than just random sausages of green stuff. It all comes down to the textures, the details. I'm not too worried about the state of this because we're going to carry this up, maybe even put Chaos Icon there, and here we're going to, might even leave that, might not even duplicate it this side, but we do need to make sure we go back and add the armor plate in here. So, but the key to any sculpting work is knowing when to put it down and let it set. So we're going to let these bits set, and then we'll come back in a bit and add some more detailing. But on the whole, I'm quite happy with that. I think he might even be able to go on the base as soon as this dries. I think we're going to stick him to the base, and that's going to give us a bit more of a hold point to really get the detail going. So, cool. See you in a bit. Okay, so here we are. Managed to glue everything back together. You can see the green stuff set into these lovely tentacles. As we said, is asymmetrical to give it a bit more chaotic look. And I think we just want to do some tidy up now, so we're going to build some more flame up the back of the skull, just because it looks a bit like a hairdo at the moment. We're going to add some detail into the tentacles, tidy up the extra armor plate we did last time, and I think I'm going to bolt this out just to give it a bit more definition. So tentacles, you can get away with what we've done with just the sausages of green stuff. However, one extra step you can add that really sort of finishes them off is just a little bit of detail to the underside. So if you see octopuses, or even classical things like Day of the Tentacle, classic video game, you often have a little bit of suckers as an underside detail. So to do that, we're going to take a tiny blob of green stuff, and then just put it on the end of our sculpting tool. We're going to press it to the underside, flatten it out to give it a bit of adhesion, then just a touch in the middle to give it some detail. So we're just going to do that a few times, again randomly along the tentacle and at random intervals, because you could go and make them all uniform depending on the creature you're sculpting, but again, chaos, so we don't want too much repetition, too much pattern into it, because people are set up to spot patterns. So again, we're just going to do that. A couple of times. And as we said before, the trick to sculpting, converting, is to take your time. Not in a rush. Just want to make it look right. So, I'm going to continue that on the other two. Now with these being smaller ones, I want smaller blobs of green stuff. It operates in the same method. One ball of green stuff, one small tentacle, and we're just going to blend the edges in just to make it look tidy. Because as I said before, when it comes to painting, any bits you haven't finished or tidied up will stand out. This is why we let everything dry before starting. Give it some stability. Again, chaos, I'm not going to do any on this one. I'm going to leave that as is. So, next we're going to put a small plate here that gives a bit of freehand, might even sculpt a dwarven rune on there to emphasise the fact that he's a dwarf, but we'll come back to that later. As with everything else, the trick to sculpting is to know the bits to do, give it opportunity to set. So we've started with a ball of green stuff, and then we're just gonna carefully push it out. Gives a nice curved armor plate, almost like a semicircle. Now you could just sculpt a ball of green stuff, cut it in half and glue it in place. But that would involve cutting it down to fit, and at least sculpting it in place means you can get the right look. And I've just snapped its leg off, so that's told me that's already too weak. We're going to have to pin that. Because even if just handling it breaks when Mort comes to paint it, I don't want things snapping. So I'm going to leave that to set. Might put a dwarven rune on there. But in the meantime, take a couple more sausages of green stuff. Just bulk this flame out a touch. So as per last time, one sausage of green stuff. Tucked in the back there. And we're not blending it in because that will help give it more of the flame look. We'll add some definition though, because this also gives us the opportunity to add pressure to make sure it sets in place. So, do the same again, a bit more flame. Sausage of green stuff. Just tuck that in place. Then add a bit of definition. a lot of flame effects come from the painting more than anything else, but at least giving the impression of some shapes and give the painter something to work with. Then just do a bit of detailing on this loincloth, or armoured loincloth, however you want to look at it. Just give it the hint of detailing. So what we'll do, at the top of it we're adding a small sausage green stuff. Really blending it in to mix it in. Then we're going to curve it round. What this will give it is the impression of almost like a hoop, a metal hoop, keeping it in place. Do the same again on the other side. Blending this in, then trimming it down. When it comes to things like armor plate, symmetry is what you really want. I know I've waxed lyrical about how chaos and avoiding symmetry, but some things just work better. So things like your armor plates, symmetry always helps it look like a manufactured thing. A pair of little lugs holding it in place. Just to add a touch of detail to the other two, I take the smallest little ball of green stuff. And with how small that is, that's still too big. Sometimes you get the green stuff in place and you see that it's not right, so. Right. So let's take the actual amount that we want, make it back into a ball. Carefully manipulate it in place. That'll give us a rivet. Now for standard rivets, I often have a press mould, that I could just put a blob of green stuff off, put the mould on, that gives us our rivet. However, for something like this, where it's quite a unique size, that'd be a bit of a waste of time, so just gonna manually fashion them. See, we've got far too much green stuff there, so we're gonna just cut it back. Then manipulate it into a nice circular shape. Not looking for too much. Is some minis, obviously you want to put filigree everywhere and make it really nice and ornate, but to be fair, this is a loincloth and it's not really going to be massively visible, I don't think so. Just a couple of little points of interest, that'll be more than enough. So, make up another one. just to give it a bit of central detail. Okay, looks good. Now we're going to tidy up this back armor plate just where it's not quite proud enough, it's not quite enough definition for my liking. Then we're going to look at doing a dwarven icon, and then I think we're just about done, bar the aforementioned pinning. So, as per usual, one sausage green stuff. Get the shape in the right place, like that. Then we'll use a flatter tool and just work it, blend it in. Get the shape right. Then blend it into the existing detail so it looks like it's part of the mini. Quite straightforward. Just adds a bit more definition, so it's easier to see where the armor plate stops. Now, a dwarf rune. Actually, looking at it, I think I'm just going to add a pair of rivets, and then I'm going to leave it, give Mort somewhere to put some freehand on. So I get a little bit of green stuff. And following the same procedure we did with these ones, just going to add a ball of green stuff. Nice little, drop that one. Tiny little ball of green stuff. Now luckily, because this is still wet green stuff, we can blend it in a bit easier. It would adhere slightly better, so again, that's far too big, so by cutting it down we get a tiny piece of green stuff. This is where digital sculpting is far easier, but each technique has its own benefits. So we can take this tiny little ball of green stuff, plonk it on there, blend it in. You know what? I think we are just about done. So I'm going to let this set. I'm going to pin this in place, get them assembled, and we'll have some photos. But otherwise, I think that worked well. Flaming skull heads, tentacles, fast, double jointed tail demon. I'm very happy with that. Had planned on putting a beard on, but I think that would detract from it. It would be too busy. So I'm going to let this dry, get them pinned back together, and see you in a minute. Okay, so I've pinned this leg back together, nice solid pin through there. You can see we're going to have to do a bit of gap fill in there to just tidy it up. Otherwise, I'm going to extend this fur up a touch just to cover this shoulder. I'm not really happy with the look of that, but otherwise I think we are just about done. So we're going to take a small sausage of green stuff, as we do normally. Just put that on the joint. So we've got to make sure we cover the whole joint. And what we'll do is we'll blend them together, so when they're undercoated you won't really notice them. So all we're doing, blending, following the lines, following the detail, just making it nice and smooth. Because again, this is the sort of thing that will show up when he's undercoated. Obviously things like washes and contrast is quite popular at the moment, so when it comes to things like that you really need to make sure you've got your lines clean, because otherwise the shade will pool in odd places. So just getting in, strengthening the join, because again, I know Mort actually has a regular gaming group, so it'd be nothing worse than when they plonk down the possessed dwarf thing to have it fall over and break. So I'm going to take a bit more green stuff. Now these are still wet because we only sculpted them earlier, so we just want to avoid the bits that we know are going to be wet, or more, what's better is generally wait until stuff is dried. It's all about taking your time, but I'd really like to get this project finished. So Mort messaged me to say that he'd finished his conversion. It is apparently quite chaotic and it is on its way to us. So what I'm doing, I'm just tucking this detail underneath the shield we sculpted on earlier, so that it looks like it's actually held in place by nicely. So there's several different ways of doing fur texture. My favourite one is you just take a small pointed sculpting tool and just tap, and you keep in small lines, because that will help it look more like fur. I mean, different depths, different lengths, because fur doesn't naturally follow patterns. So what we're going to do is just worry the edges so it looks a bit like torn skin. So come around this side. And looking at it, what I think I'm going to do. Again, sometimes you just do things on the fly. I'm just going to scrape this up a touch. Create a rough circle. Because what I'd like to do is, again, so we're going for asymmetry here. I'm just going to take, same as we did with the tentacles, just a little cone of green stuff, shape right for this. So we're going to make this into a cone. That'll form. There's a horn coming out of the armour. Very similar to one of the Warhammer Underworld Chaos Warriors. He's got a fur cloak held in place by spikes coming out of his armour. Instead we're just giving a bit of definition at the base of it to make it look more like a horn. There we are. I think that is that. Small bit of green stuff always gets rolled out into a tube, because that's always good for conversion work. So fast demon chaos dwarf with tentacles and a flaming skull head. I think, considering could have used an actual chaos dwarf if I had one, but I think that's come out quite well. So what we're going to do, we're going to get this boxed up, sent off to Mort, and we will see what we get in return. Thank you.